your cell phones. And when we get to the audience Q&A, we have a microphone right here. It's kind of hidden behind the pillar for some of you all, but C-SPAN is filming, and we're filming for our YouTube channel. So please ask your questions into the microphones. Tonight, I am very excited to welcome Professor Hiram L. Smith to discuss his book on the history and meaning of one of the most controversial words in American English. Few words in English are as charged as the word discussed today. While the slur with the hard R is universally recognized as offensive, fierce debates continue over the use of the other ending with an A. Who can say it, what it means, and whether it has been reclaimed as a term of endearment among Black people? Are these two words or one word with two pronunciations, and do they have different meanings? This is the first book written by an African-American linguist to explore the word's origin, the history, and the usage, drawing on sources across time from 19th century slave narratives and ex-slave recordings to contemporary conversations on social media. The book reveals how the word's meanings may vary according to the context and across racial groups. It changes myths about reclamation, explains why multiple pronunciations exist, and examines what the evidence really shows about how and whether meanings have changed over time. Professor Smith is a professor in linguistics at Bucknell University. He published the first historical study of the word discussed today, and his research interests span African American English, Afro-Hispanic Creole languages, Spanish, and Pennsylvanian Dutch. So without further ado, please join me in welcoming to Politics and Prose, Professor Hiram L. Smith.
Thank you, Alan, for that nice introduction, and thank all of you for coming. I appreciate it very much. Most of you don't know me, so you didn't come here to see me. You came here because you were interested in this topic, and for that, you are to be commended. I'd like to also thank Politics and Prose for having me this evening, as well as C-SPAN, and thank you for the event team for doing all of this. I'd like to thank Georgetown University Press as well, and my editors here this evening, Hope LeGros. I want to give her a shout out for believing in this project and for helping me along the way. And of course, my colleagues are here as well from Georgetown and elsewhere, and my lovely wife Lisa is here on the front and second to the row here. Now, I just want to warn you, we're going to use the word nigger in this conversation. And as a matter of fact, let me retract that. We're not going to use it, we're going to refer to it. I'd like to make a distinction between use and reference. So some people believe that you shouldn't even refer to it. You might burst into flames. For the sake of linguistic accuracy, we're going to name the word. We're not going to sanitize it or deodorize it or euphemize it in this conversation. And another piece of the content warning is that, when you're dealing with real language data, real speakers, anything can come out of their mouth. And so there may be other language that some may find offensive or coarse, profanity, and so forth. I try to keep that limited, but you may run across that in this talk. Which brings us to the idea of the language police. Arthur Spear's African-American Language made a very astute comment. He said, speech use, as it's used in the community, is out of the hands of moral guardians and the language police, because people are going to talk the way they talk, whether we like it or not, whether you like it or not, whether I like it or not. So the purpose of this talk is to try to model an open academic discussion and dialogue surrounding a word that some feel is taboo. I'd like to introduce the idea that it's important to have linguists, historians, or scholars as part of these conversations. But I really want to talk to decision makers, school boards, and HR professionals. Kids are getting expelled from school for saying "What's up, my nigga?" to their friends at the lunch table. So I hope that this book and this talk can do something to that end in a positive way. I just want to say that during the Q&A, you'll notice I have slide numbers here. So if you want me to go back to a slide, just jot down the number during the talk. That way I'm not scrolling up and down. It's a lot more efficient this way. You probably can't see this. I'll just briefly share with you what's in the table of contents. Talk a little bit about why we need African-American linguists to weigh in on this word. Chapter 2 discusses the origins. What language or languages does the word nigga come from? That's interesting. Why do we have two pronunciations in the first place? We're going to talk a little bit about that tonight. We're dealing with one word or two here based on the pronunciation. And but more germane to what we're going to discuss tonight is how long have Black people been using the term nigga amongst ourselves? And then, so we'll look at some of that evidence, and then we'll also talk about Chapter 6 in particular. Has this word been reappropriated as a term of endearment? That's the question of the hour. And then there's some other juicy stuff in the book that you can check out on your own. So this is how we're going to organize it. I'm going to see if I can squeeze this in 45 minutes. So without further ado, we're going to have some talk about nigger in the colonial world. We'll talk about chapters 5 and 6, as we mentioned, and I want to share a little bit about this linguistic study that I conducted. So who should write a book like this? Well, you know, others have written books that have the title, but this is the first time that a linguist has weighed in. And Arthur Spears makes a good point. An African-American linguist, but you got to go deeper than that. Somebody who's culturally Black, too. Because it's only if you have a lifetime being embedded in the community that you can really understand what the word means. Now, schooling and education, that gives us the linguistic tools. I'm going to share some of those tools with you tonight, how we can look at this word. But really, a lot of patterns that we find in African-American language are not discernible without a lifetime of immersion in the community. Now that's true for any speech community. That's not unique to Black people. Now, some folks may wonder, why would any self-respecting Black person ever call himself or another Black person a nigger at all? Well, I'd like to make another very quick distinction before we get started here. Geneva Smitherman makes a beautiful point. She says that Black folks, we don't call each other nigger. We address each other and refer to one another as with the term. And she says that name calling is a linguistic offense. Like you called someone a name, it usually has a negative connotation. Now, this distinction often is not understood by linguistic outsiders, and that's a point that I want to continue making over the course of this talk. Now, I would like to add, though, that sometimes Black folks do call each other. You know what I'm saying? We do. But that's not the primary usage, and I think that's what Geneva Smitherman wants to point out. Folks who don't speak Black English often overestimate their ability to understand it. This is one of the problems that we have with the conversations about nigger. Black folks are on TV all the time saying this is how we use it, and yet we're not believed in most instances. And sometimes we can say that one of the reasons is that's the imposition of white cultural norms on a speech variety like AAE by individuals who have shown demonstrably that they don't understand the variety, tend to impose their attitudes and viewpoints on African American language. Getting back to this other idea about why black people use the term, I guess the question maybe should be, when and why. We know that enslaved Africans and their descendants, we heard the word nigger when we first came to these shores, or when the children were born in the colonies. That's what we were called. They didn't call you by your name, they called you nigger. Nigger was everywhere in the society. And of course, back then, there wasn't any pushback like you have now, social movements and so forth, to argue against its use. And once again, Arthur Spears says that, and others, that some form of the word nigger, some pronunciation of the word nigger was used by black folks since the earliest days in the colonies. And so I'd like to show you real quick that the word nigger is not just an United States invention. It's all over the colonial world. So, for example, Louisiana French Creole and Haitian Creole, you have a word neg. Now, neg comes from the French word nègre, which just means black, right? But in the Creoles, it's neg. And over time, it has become completely delinked and bleached from any racialized connotation. It just means dude, person, guy, or individual. So in Haitian Creole, you can have a neg noir, a black guy, and a neg blanc. They called Jesse Jackson a neg blanc when he went to Haiti, black as Jesse Jackson is. Now that's interesting, and it just meant a foreigner of any race. I don't know if anybody speaks Spanish here. Spanish, Portuguese, you have mi negro, mi negra. Now in those languages, mi negro is just a term of endearment that lovers can use to each other. You can use it with with close friends, and it just means a very close, dear, beloved person. In talk piecing, a Creole language spoken in Papua New Guinea, you have black fella. Now, obviously, you can look at the word. Historically, it meant black fella, but now it has become completely emancipated from any racial meaning, and it just means dude or person, whereas white fella means a foreigner of any race. So you see how this word has been spread throughout the colony. So we observe a shared semantic development, a term that was historically, that had racial connotations or indexed race. It's become a general noun to refer to humans, individuals, solidarity, affection, term of endearment, etc. And we see that this has been a case of semantic bleaching or weakening over time. Now, that's not unusual. This happens to many nouns. So now we get to why I came here. It's to talk about this term and has it been reappropriated as a term of endearment. And in order to answer that question, I think the first thing that we should do is define reappropriate, and reclaim. To reappropriate something means to employ or adapt something for a different person than originally intended. So if I take this shoe here and hammer in a nail, I've reappropriated this shoe. Reclaim, on the other hand, is a symbolic or figurative taking something back. Could be a word, could be something else. So we see our two examples here. Now, the reappropriation argument has several components. Let's break them down. The first part of the reappropriation argument is that the word nigger, E-R, hard R, originated as a racial slur among whites early in U.S. history. The second component is in black people, African Americans in particular, have reappropriated this word and has reclaimed its use, especially the hip-hop generation. And the claim is that the hip-hop generation changed it, flipped it, deliberately so, changed the meaning, right? And now we own it. I think everybody in this room has heard something like that. And we've turned it into a term of empowerment or endearment. And of course, this shift apparently happened, according to the argument, during the last couple of decades. So I want to share with y'all something. If you have 2 minutes, just an aside, I want you to see. It's Oprah Winfrey interviewing Jay-Z. Let's see what they have to say about the reappropriation argument.
I've been
in my Facebook business here.
Known for not being a big fan of rap music because of misogynist lyrics and because of the use of the N-word. And in the magazine, we discussed the use of the N-word and why I feel, everybody knows that I feel that we shouldn't be, singing the N-word. You obviously feel differently. And
A little bit.
A little bit. A little bit. And tell everybody why.
What we had discussed is more of words. People give words power.
Yeah.
And for our generation, what we did was we took the word and we took the power out of that word. Mm-hmm. We turned a word that was very ugly and hurtful into a term of endearment. So, even when someone says there's still intention behind what you say. Mm-hmm. But pretty much took the power out of the word. Because if we just start removing words from the dictionary, just make up another word the next day. So we don't address the problem. The problem is racism, right? That's really the problem.
So we disagree.
Yeah.
Yeah. And what I said is, I guess my generation's just going to have to die out. We're just going to have to all just be dead. And this morning I was saying, well, from the grave, I'll be go, Jay, I still disagree. And the reason
you don't have to say that.
And the reason I feel that way, because my generation and generations before me, obviously, coming up through the civil rights movement, and I am where I am because there was a generation before me that fought for civil rights, and that word carries such a sense of hatred and degradation. And I always think about when I hear the word, even when I'm at the concert and people are screaming it at your concert, I think about black men who were lynched, and that's the last word they heard. And so that comes from my generation.
Right.
Okay. So, we agree to disagree.
Which is a strong point.
Okay. So, who's right? Jay-Z or Oprah? Sorry, the video didn't pop up. So Jay-Z claims that black usage of the word nigga is new, it's recent, it's novel, and it's a term of endearment, and it's a result of innovations made by the hip-hop generation, right? That's his bottom line. Oprah, on the other hand, says there's no practical difference between white racist usage of the word nigga during pre-civil rights and black folks using the term, young folks using the term nigga today. Well, so the problem that I've found with such claims is that, first of all, whenever you watch programs like this, there's not a linguist or historian within 100 miles of these conversations. And nobody's done any research. They're presenting things without evidence, claims without evidence. And it seems like the only expertise you need is to have a talk show or to be black or to be a football player. And it is not denigrating the football players. But I really want to argue that we need to do some research. I want to introduce another concept here. That's the recency illusion. You ever heard of it? So the recency illusion, I didn't make this up. This is a term coined by Arnold Zwicky. He says it's the belief or impression that a word or language use is of recent origin when in fact it's long established. You think it's new, and just because you never heard of it, but it's been around for a long time. Now that can afflict any of us. So some examples are axe. Let me ask you a question. Axe been around for 1,000 years, at least as long as ask, if not before. Irregardless, singular they, been around several hundred years. Look it up. You don't got to believe me. It's Merriam-Webster's Oxford English Dictionary to tell you that. So the key is, how do we put to the test these claims of reappropriation, instead of just getting on TV making claims without any evidence? Well, I argue that you have to do a couple of things. First, we have to know the original or early meanings of the word nigger. Then we have to figure out how long black people have been using this term. Can we go all the way back to the plantation? I used to watch stuff like this, and I would say hip-hop generation, but my grandmama and them used to say nigger. That can't be right. My grandmama didn't listen to rap music. We have to find out how black folks have used it. Was it a term of endearment back in slavery times? Then we got to compare old usage, historical usage, with modern day usage. And then we have to make a couple of assessments. And the first one is, if it really is new, we should be able to point to a comedy routine, a song, a movie, or something where we can see the word starting to change meanings, right? Pivotal point in history. And the last thing I want to mention here is we need to also see how black folks primarily use the term. Because anyone who's familiar with the term knows that it can have positive, neutral, and negative meanings. But which one of those meanings is the most frequent, right? So that's a question we want to ask here today. So has nigger been reappropriated, or are we witnessing the recency illusion? I think you know where I'm going with this. Very quickly, why do we have two pronunciations in the first place? Where did the pronunciation nigger come from? Have you thought about that? So Eddie Griffin says you got it mixed up. We don't say nigger, talking about black folks. We say nigga, and that's two different words. Okay, and a lot of people feel that way. So we want to ask, where do these pronunciations come from, and do they signal two different words? We can talk about that in the Q&A. Well, African-American linguist Jacqueline Rahman proposes a West African language hypothesis. You know, the slave trade was in Central West Africa. People who came here spoke those languages before they learned English. Now, in Central West African languages, those languages, the syllable structure, they don't end their words or syllables often with a consonant. They end them with a vowel. So when individuals learned English, they experienced language interference or transfer from their heritage languages. And so a word like brother and mother and father and nigger, right, would be pronounced without the final sound, consonant sound. And there's another idea of theory that there's maybe some British influence. Now, we know that when the colonists came here, they used to pronounce their R's unlike modern British speech norms. So a word like cart would have been pronounced cart in 1607. But later on, the British stopped pronouncing their R's, in particular after a vowel. So a word like cart became caught. And that is what we hear typically today. Now, this fancy way of talking, we thought back then, gained some social prestige. And so plantation owners bought and sold slaves in England and educated their brats over there. And they viewed the London variety of speech as prestigious, and they copycatted this speech. And they brought it back to the American South. And so you started getting words like, instead of sugar, sugar, brother, cornbread, pork chops, because that was the fancy way to talk back then. And of course, nigger. So nigger was really no different than any other word that had the R in the right place for deletion. Now, we have to keep in mind, too, that before World Wars I and II, 91% of all black people in this country lived in the South. That's just about everybody. And 75% of them lived in rural areas. And we call it the migration. It was really an exodus. But black folks moved north in search of jobs and to escape domestic terrorism. And what did they take with them? Their speech patterns, right? And so now you get up north and you have two competing forms for the word nigger. You've got nigger because the rest of the country in the north, for the most part, was R pronouncing, and you also had nigger competing alongside. And of course, some of these regional features got confused with or misidentified. I'll say identified as ethnic features only. And of course, we can't discount the influence of Creole languages, right? Creole speakers could have also contributed. We know that at some point, people didn't go all the way to Africa to get human beings. They just went to the Caribbean, right? And so we get Creole influence. Okay, now what I would like to do is share with you some of the historical evidence. I told you that we would look at some of the history, I want to just ask this question to you as a rhetorical question. How long do you think black folks have been using the term nigger to address each other and to refer to each other? You think it was a recent innovation? We can already go back to maybe grandmama or auntie. Let's see how far back we can go. 1830s, British actress Fanny Kimball was visiting the United States, visiting some plantations. She said black folks was calling each other nigger on the plantations, even calling the children little niggers on the plantation. She said she didn't like it, but that's attested back in the 1830s. 1859, autobiographical novel written by a black author, Harriet Wilson. The title is Our Nig. The term nigger was used in there several times by black and white characters alike. Here's an example. Where you come from, you sly nigger. When you come in this shop again, you better let a nigger know it. That's in 1859. 1861, Incidents in the Life of a Slave Girl, written by another African-American author, Harriet Jacobs, has the word nigger in the text 27 times, twice uttered by black characters. And so one of the instances, she says the young girl was fleeing, escaping her white pursuers, escaped, and she said, whew, this nigga was too cute for him this time. And referring to herself. So we're also starting to get some ideas about usage and how it was used back then. And another example in the text was, 'twas that Jenny. That nigga's always got the devil in her, referring to another young black lady. In 1861. Now, but what about real people, real speakers? These are autobiographical novels. Are you familiar with the ex-slave narratives? So in the 1930s and 40s and some few decades past that, the United States government wanted to send out researchers. They wanted to get the story of America. They wanted to interview its oldest citizens. They sent editors and writers and all kinds of folks out to get folk songs and stories. And as part of this project, one of the things that they did is they interviewed people who were formerly enslaved, folks who were born before the Civil War, right? They experienced slavery, and now they're free, and they wanted to find out their story. Now, a lot of these audio recordings, and they were audio recorded, by the way, and transcribed. Now, a lot of the recordings have been lost to time, unfortunately. We have 22 audio recordings that are known to be in existence. Now, about these recordings, they suck. The recordings are terrible. They weren't done by experts, but you know, that they're all we have. Some of them are better quality than others, and I'm going to let you hear some of them here in a second. And they were transcribed, and the transcriptions, they sucked. They weren't transcribed by experts. There's a lot of stereotyped and exaggerated examples, and it's really hard to tell what are the real African-American English features in the transcriptions for the ones that we don't have the audio recordings to check them against, and which ones are buffooned examples. Some of these transcriptions were corrected by linguists. Now, the importance of these recordings is that they represent some of the only audio recorded speech of black people who lived, number one, in the 19th century, two, before the Great Black Migration, before integration. Linguists have lighted on these because has Black English changed? Has it diverged from itself? We love these types of questions. And I was curious about the recordings because I wanted to see if they used the word nigga in there with white interviewers. And they did. So I'd like to share some of this with you. Again, some of the audio here, we might need to turn some of these up. Not this one as much, but the ones afterwards. This is Fountain Hughes. You know what? I'll let him introduce himself to you.
Talk to who?
Well, just tell me what your name is.
My name is Fountain Hughes. I was born in Charlottesville, Virginia. My grandfather belonged to Thomas Jefferson. My grandfather was 115 years old when he died. And now I am 101 years old. That's enough.
Isn't that awesome? These have so many beautiful stories, heart-wrenching stories. I want you to listen to somebody else. Now, this is an example here we have of so Miss Laura Smiley was talking about, she was there at Juneteenth. I'll let her tell you about it.
We all got up and all of them went to the house to see old master. And I thought old master was dead, but it wasn't. He had been off to the war and come back. But then I didn't know, into the war. I just didn't know it was gone a long time. All the niggas gathered around to see old master again. And old master didn't tell it was free.
All the niggas gathered around to see old master again. Notice, and it's interesting, in all of these examples and the recordings, no one says massa. They say master, all of them. But we can talk about that later. Here's another example from Miss Smiley.
See, one portion of the people belonged to Mr. Bethany, and one portion, belonged to his wife. Wife's approval, just like, you'd have a lot of niggas, and they give you a portion of them, and your wife portion of them. Her people give you a heap of them, and then your people give you some. Well, that makes two parts. You got a part, and your wife got a part, colored folks out of the way.
Okay, so she's talking about when a slave owner dies and he's giving away he's partitioning out his property to his family. George Johnson. Now, George talks pretty fast. You're gonna have to hold on to your britches here to keep up with old George.
They sent me back to the shop, and Master Jeff sent to Richmond, Virginia, and got 2 teachers. They opened a night school. They educated all these niggas. They made my father a civil engineer. And they made cutting eyes on the government as bookkeeper. And on, they made different ones, farmers, carpenters, sawmills, gins, all like that.
Besides the use of the word niggas in this context, some of these stories, he's talking about, Master Jeff here is Jefferson Davis, from the president of the Confederacy, owned his father. And he said Jefferson Davis educated all his niggas. Now, to the extent that's true, that's an interesting story. Here's another one. Miss Irene Williams had gone to church on Sunday. They used to make these beautiful dresses for the women and girls, and they compliment each other.
Every path and road on the place was filled with those who were going to church, and the woods rang with their joy and happiness and their calls to each other. Morning there, Sister Maisie. How's yours? Oh, I tolerable well, thank you. How's yours? That sure am a pretty dress what you got on. Where'd you get it? You going outshine all them niggas in Oak Grove Church today. Yes, man, you sure is going to outshine us all.
I think that's my favorite. So you're going to outshine all them niggas in Oak Grove Church today with that pretty dress that you got on. So the ex-slave recordings, along with the Federal Writers Project, I won't get into much detail, but they're very similar. The Federal Writers Project, there were 2,300 written interviews. We don't have the audio recordings. So that's really the only practical distinction. And we do have the transcripts. And how many times did the word nigger appear in these narratives? I counted 5,632 times. But the ER, hard R spelling obviously was the most frequent. AH 97 times, UH 10 times, NIG 3 times, and nigger with an A spelled such appeared 1 time in the transcripts. And I'm gonna go ahead and fast forward here a little bit because I want to get right into the historical evidence, and I want to show you. Well, let me say one more thing. If we don't have the audio transcripts, audio recordings, how do we know that the transcriptions are accurate? Well, first of all, we know something about arlessness in the American South, right? So we know that black folks were, at that time in those places were generally arless. The recordings that we do have, the pronunciation was nigger 100% of the time. So we can use that when we're thinking about the transcripts that don't have audio recordings. And then, of course, the field workers made some really interesting commentary. I almost forgot about this. Let me share this with you. So in this one particular case, see if I can pull up the pen here. So this is the guy, this is the field worker, and he said, this paper fails to record Fanny Durham's accent with any approach to accuracy. She spoke fairly accurately and clearly, with a good deal of attention to grammaticalness, but she pronounces all of her ER ending as For example, nigger, colored, father, mother, master, and daughters. So we can be pretty sure that the pronunciation was nigger. Now, we're going to look at some historical examples, and I'm running out of time. And when you look at the examples, I want you to use the substitution test. And the substitution test works like this. If you see a sentence, it has the word nigger in there, substitute another word that fits perfectly. That will tell you what the speaker meant in the context. Don't make the all too common mistake of believing that just because it says nigger, it's actually circular, that it just means a slur. So this is what we're going to do. We're going to look at some of these examples. So from the slave narratives, we find neutral uses where the word just means people. A whole college of them niggas got together and packed up and went to Oklahoma. It took us 3 months to get there walking. So in this case, niggas just means people. We also find some positive uses in the historical data. Talking about Jefferson Davis again, he said that Mr. George Johnson said, yeah, next day he fired him. That's what kind of man he was. Fired him for that nigger. Yes, sir. Master Jeff, take up for his nigger. And so we can see that this is certainly not a negative usage, but a positive one. But we also see some negative uses in the historical data. This Mr. Ellis Ken Cannon says, you know, some of these white folks, you'd be surprised how good they was to me. They don't treat me like a nigger. So what does it mean to treat somebody like a nigger? Poorly or badly? Clearly a negative use of the term nigger in this context. We see nigger referring to human beings. This case, a slave. So we look in the enslaved person. When you look at the context, that's what it means. Let's look at example number 2. So I recollect one time when they brought in them hounds. They had them hounds and brought in 3 niggers with them hound. Runaway niggers, you know, caught in the wood. So runaway niggers is runaway slaves. That's what it means in this particular context. But the word also meant a black person, depending on the context. So this land, let's look at the second example. It's very clear. I heard a nigger tell a white man once. So you see the contrast? What does nigger mean? A black person, right? In this context. Sometimes it just meant people or folks. You're going to outshine all them niggas in Oak Grove Church today, right? All the people, all the folks, all the parishioners. And notice she includes herself in that number, outshine us all, right? As Fanny Kimball observed, folks used the term little niggas on the plantation. She was correct. So Miss Frances Bridges from Oklahoma City, she said, the cook, Mama Winnie Long, used to feed all us little niggas on the floor, just like little pigs in tin cups and wooden spoons. All us little niggas, all us little children, right? And then there's some other examples as well. We also see the use of nigger by who's being referred to. You can refer to yourself. We saw the example earlier. This nigga's too cute for him this time, referring to me. And he fought for us niggas' freedom. You can address somebody directly. You go your way, you nigger. Third person, a whole heap of niggas voted for a while. He was a ginger cake nigger. By the way, does anybody know what a ginger cake nigger is? Redheaded, ginger cake, okay? It could refer to specific people. That's Jeff Davis's nigger. A non-specific person is just, it's not a specific person, just any member of a class. So we're talking about all the young niggas that got sold. Not anybody specific, but just anybody that happened to be on the block there. Then there was generic reference. Generic is like when you refer to the whole class, not somebody specific. Like, so when you say giraffes have long necks, you're not talking about a specific giraffe, but the class. So white folks can't sing a song like a nigger, meaning black folks in general. We saw an example earlier where the word nigger referred to a young girl. Jenny got the devil in her. And I want to say something very briefly about adjective type. Why do we care about what kind of adjective the word nigger appears with? Because when we're trying to figure out meaning, the context is important. And the adjective that the word nigger appears with can tell us something about the speaker's intended meaning in that context. So sometimes the word nigger appeared in the data with no adjective. So there was no school for niggas back in them days. Sometimes it appeared with an indefinite article. When you come in this shop, again, let a nigger know it, referring to himself. Demonstrative adjectives, words that mean that are this and that. This is close to the speaker, that is furthest from the speaker. This nigga was too cute. That's the way they would do that, nigga. Possessive adjectives. Now, this is interesting because we make such a big deal about this expression, my nigga, right? So, possessive adjective. In the data, there were 31 examples of the phrase, my nigga. And it was the people who were telling the stories put the expression in the mouth of the white slave owners. There's no evidence in these data of black people using the term my nigga. So in an example like this is my nigga and my child, usually to index ownership. I want to fast forward. I think we've seen a lot of examples here. I don't want you to get example fatigue. You probably got example fatigue. But I want to move to the modern day data and just compare them side by side, okay? And some of these examples. So pardon me if I do some scrolling here. So here's the modern day usage. Now the modern day data were taken from Facebook, and back then it was called Twitter. And we're gonna do the same thing that we did with the historical example. So we have neutral meanings. Here's a neutral meaning. Y'all niggas better hit me up. I'm ready to make that Oklahoma trip, cuzzo. It just means you guys in this context. Would you agree? Positive meanings. Happy Father's Day, my nig. Thanks, my nigga. Happy Father's Day to you too. That's positive. But nigga can have some very negative meanings, even in an African-American context. Marquise is a bitch-made nigga. Don't get whooped, my nigga. Come around here, I'm gonna find your ass. Or this nigga slapped her with her baby in her lap and then walked away like he was hot shit. Y'all niggas are trash for real. So clearly, this is a negative usage. And notice that the term my nigga, which is often held as the positive term of endearment par excellence, is used in a very negative context here. Nigga can refer to human beings as it did in the historical data, with one exception. We don't find any evidence of the term meaning slave or enslaved person in the modern day data. It can also mean a black person. Y'all niggas do know white folks is watching, right? Yeah, the term nigga can mean just people, folks, person. Niggas be throwing parties with no food and wonder why everybody be fighting. Nigga, we hungry. Right? So people are throwing parties. This is something that we find with the women in the data. The word nigga can often refer to a male, a man, a boyfriend, a lover, a mate. Getting pregnant does not keep a nigga. What does it mean in this context? A man, a guy, right? You can use the term nigga to address females. So there's a couple examples here of a white male talking to a white woman. Hit me back, little old nigga. Nice pick, my nigga, said to a white woman. I'll skip through some of these examples. Can mean your homies. I think that's the one that we're most familiar with. I'm cooling with my niggas at the Butterfly Lounge. This is interesting. Children. Remember that expression, little niggas? I remember my grandmama's boyfriend would say, "Come here, little nigga. You look just like your daddy." That expression has perdured over time. This black female says, "My little nigga going to the 4th grade. Badass." And she had a picture of her child. I'm going to stop here. I think you've seen a lot of examples, and I have more that we can talk about during the Q&A or even after the Q&A. But one thing that I found in my quantitative research, I did a quantitative study, and I calculated all of the times that nigga was used, and in what grammatical context, what environments, by speaker race, by speaker gender, by meaning. And what I found was, it was surprising to me, the group that uses the term "my nigga" the most was not black folks. Black folks in the modern day data use the term nigga in a very neutral way most of the time, and then negative usage and then positive. As a matter of fact, and I can show you the graph here shortly, positive usage was the least frequent among African Americans. You know the group that used the term nigga in the most in positive ways the most? White males. Hey my nigga, hey my buddy, hey my pal. It seems like white males on social media, with their overly affective, overly affiliative use with their black friends, are using nigga in positive ways. In other words, the white folks did not pattern like black people in this data at all. So the question is, when you consider the evidence, how long have African Americans been using the term nigga? In what context? With what meanings? What do you think? Do you think it's recently been reappropriated by the hip hop community? Or are we dealing with another case of the recency illusion? So I will leave it to you guys now. Questions?
Yes, I wanted to, the book James by Percival Eliot talks a lot about the usage of the word. And obviously it's widespread during the slavery system, but you also have to consider it was a controlled system. So if they considered it negative, if they said something different, they could be uppity, they could be punished with death, you know. So how does that sociological system affect the use of the language? They might have to use the language.
Yeah, that's a good question. So the flip side of that idea is that there weren't any other words to refer to or describe black people. We weren't using African American during slavery times. We didn't use blacks, right? Nigga was the word that was used. Now, what is interesting though, is that one of the oldest recorded uses of the term African American is in 1831. But when you're talking about a system where again, nigga was pervasive, there was nothing you could do about it. How could a person, for me the question is not why did black people use the term, but how could you not have under circumstances such as those? And of course, you know, African Americans also were the sociolinguistic situation was more complex than I'm about to make it seem. But, you know, when black folks were talking to each other, we have to remember that nigga was not just a word that was imposed from without. It was also within the community. Thanks for the question.
Hello.
How you doing?
I'm all right. How you doing?
Not too bad.
I'm not a linguist, but I am an ex-academic, and I'm still traumatized by my dissertation committee. So I'm gonna pass that on to you.
The trauma?
Yeah.
I got my own trauma behind that.
Let's go. I'm curious. So when you pulled the modern data for looking at nigger, like, since there's like infinity that you could possibly look at if you're looking at the internet, how did you decide where to look and what sample to pull?
Yeah, let me see if I can show you. So what I looked at were social factors like what the race and the gender of individuals, but also grammatical categories. Did nigga appear with a demonstrative adjective, a possessive adjective like my nigga, a descriptive adjective? Was it used to address somebody or to refer to somebody in the third person? What database did the data come from? And basically what I did is then I gave each sentence that contained the word nigga a code. So if you look at examples 1 and 2, like don't no nigga come before my kids, I applied those codes. So in this case, we see that the speaker is a black female. The database was Facebook. There's no modifier, no adjective. She's not addressing anybody. She's talking in the third person. And so what I did is I took 1,100 examples here, and I put them in a computer that analyzes linguistic data, and it popped out some numbers for me.
All right. And out of curiosity, does your book contain more details about the specifics of your study, or can we see that on like your dissertation or something like that?
Absolutely. As a matter of fact, so the most detailed information you can find is my 2019 study that was published in American Speech Journal. That's real linguistically, that breaks it down a lot further. But there are details in the book in chapters 5 and in chapter 6 in particular. In chapter 7, when I did a quantitative study of white speakers too, you'll find that in chapter 7.
Nice. Thank you.
Yeah, you bet. Thanks for that question.
Hi, how are you?
Not too bad. How are you?
I'm okay. So I want to say I'm probably in the Oprah camp of the Oprah and Jay-Z dialogue. I'm very curious about if you analyze the data for generational differences. And then I can't help but analyze and think about it. I'm not a linguist at all, but think about the use of bitch and nigger, and then how those two are similar or dissimilar. And I'm probably in the same camp as far as that goes too.
Okay, very
Full
good.
disclosure.
No, that's okay. Now, as a linguist, the way I see my job, I don't censor or endorse any speech. My job is just to describe language. Now, I got my opinions too, just like you, but I'm not going to articulate them here. I want you to read the book and see if I can.
I'll read the book.
In the book, I try to be neutral, dispassionate, right, and objective about my personal feelings. And what was your first question again?
So it's about the generational
yeah.
divide. So if you look at the data, because you have males and females, if you looked at the generation of Oprah, I'm not in the same generation, but I'm just saying, following that line of thought, like if you see the breakdown, so probably if you look at the analog to that for being a woman, the bitch camp, my daughter's generation is more likely to use that than my generation would be, for example. So I'm wondering if you found something similar.
Yeah, no, I didn't look at that specifically because there's not a lot of data, real speech data for regular folks using the word nigger. Enough to where you can do a quantitative analysis and do a lot of counting. So, but when you look at the slave narratives, you can consider that somewhat of a, I don't want to say generational thing, but at least I call it historical. We do find some differences. For the most part, we find that the term nigger has been pretty much the same in its meanings from the plantation to the modern day era. So both groups of speakers use the term mainly in neutral ways, right, and not in positive ways. But it was the historical data where you found more neutral usage than with the modern day speakers. We also found that in the modern day data, as I pointed out earlier, that the term slave, the term nigger does not refer to an enslaved person or slave. But what else is interesting, and I didn't get it to show you, the term nigger can also refer to non-human entities. So for example, in the modern day data, when there was an example of a guy he was talking about his cat. He said, my cat fell into the toilet. Damn, that nigger dumb. Now, you can't, let me give you another example. He says, another guy says, man, this nigger just came by and stung me, referring to a wasp. Then there's a third example. The guy has a picture of his chihuahua, and he says, I don't need ADT, home security. This little nigga warns you about everything. So we find that that's a difference in the data. Now, does that mean that black folks from times past didn't use the term nigger to refer to animals and pets and insects? I don't know. It's possible. But if I'm just going strictly by the data, then we see a difference there. But the other thing that's interesting about that is that in those contexts, you cannot argue that the term nigger is a racial slur because it's not indexing a human being. You're talking about wasps and pets. So, but I, sensitive to your point, I really wish we had, because I would love to, I remember my aunties and my grandmama and them and others, many others, just talking, and that's who I want to study. But it's very difficult even today to find enough speakers to use the term nigger around an outsider like myself, a researcher, especially the white demographic, in order to get enough examples of nigger to use for a study like this, which is why I turned to social media, because I knew I could get enough examples of people, because people aren't going to talk the way they talk behind closed doors with a Poindexter like me. But thank you for that beautiful question. I want to talk to you more about it afterwards.
Excellent work.
Thank you.
Good evening. I don't know, my voice is booming sometimes. So I have to be careful. So somewhat in line with the previous speaker, and I'm not a linguist by any stretch of the imagination, but I'm curious about the kind of like evolution of language and archetypes that develop. So to her point, I think over time, the hip hop generation, what they did was separate the use of the word nigga from bitches and hoes. Because I feel like when you think of the archetype now, when someone says nigga, even when they're referring to a human, your archetype is a man. You don't necessarily, when someone says, look at niggas, your archetype is like a group of males, whether they're white, black, whatever, it's a male archetype versus, hip hop introduced bitches and hoes to refer to women, and then it's like, oh, hoes is like women, niggas are men. And kind of like, if you have any thoughts about that, and then also curious about like, what are your questions now? So like, what now? So we know that it hasn't changed really over time, and that it's been used in this way over time. Kind of where do we go next? As a linguist, kind of like, what are implications and next steps in that field of how you take that information and use it in your work or not apply it in other spaces?
Thank you. That's a great question. Now, you're right. That, even when you look through the data, the most frequent usage of the word nigger and who the referent is males. But you do find, as a couple of examples showed here, that it can be used by females, toward females, and in a mixed group of people, males and females. But yeah, primarily, I think you're right. It's you tend to think of a male. Now that's an interesting observation that you made, though, about bitches and hoes over here and niggas over here. I want to look more into that based on your question. As far as my personal research, Alexis Davis she replicated this study, and she used real speech data from sociolinguistic interviews, sit down and interview with a person, and in the choral, the Corpus of Regional African American English. It's a big old database that has a lot of interviews of black folks talking. I'd like to explore that some more because there's some richness there. Maybe I can do something with Alexis. But I want to look more into these slave narratives. Not so much for the term nigger, but for the content of some of these stories. They're absolutely fantastic in terms of what we can glean. When you allow suffering to speak and the oppressed to speak, they can have there's a new narrative history there, one that's not in the history books. And some of these stories about black folks getting educated, and I want to pursue that. I want to pursue that some more and do some more research.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, Thank you. Any other questions?
Hello.
Hi, how you doing?
Hey, so I'm wondering, because you mentioned the use or the Caucasian use of the word, and was there an evolution then in terms of where it became defanged, where the potency or the taboo was lost? Because growing up, as I did in New York, in the Bronx, 70s and 80s, you know, we learned what the taboos were. But now you're saying, you know, young males or whomever are freely using the word, and to me it's still highly offensive. So I'm wondering where or when in history that shift occurred.
So a couple of things. First, you have to talk about who you're talking about. White folks, black folks.
White, you know, white people referring to each other, you know, with the N-word, or African American people, you know.
Yeah.
Like, again, for us growing up in a certain period, it was completely off limits and just ugly and, you know, unacceptable.
Yeah. No, that's a great question. Now, when you think about the term nigger and its origins, and if you look at its history, scholars generally agree that the term nigger originally was a neutral term that pejorated over time. And especially during the period around Emancipation and Reconstruction, you really start to see in the literature the word nigger really becoming a term of institutional contempt and abuse. But when you look early on in its uses, go to Oxford English Dictionary, for example, in the early uses in the 1500s, it was used more as a referential term. But this idea of the people today, young people today, using a word, and like as you mentioned, you know, to you it's offensive, but it depends on what your speech community is. So if you come from a speech community, and I would mention this in the book, that there are different worlds, there are at least 3 different worlds of people who are familiar with nigger. There's world number 1, people who use the word nigger all the time or hear it all the time with no thought whatsoever as to what outsiders may think about it. They grew up hearing it. It's in their community. Then there's folks who are adjacent to that group of people, either more or less. Sometimes they have more of a emblematic usage of the term nigger because they listen to it in hip-hop music and so forth. But you have to wonder, too, are there white people who can use African-American English or even the word nigger in authentic ways? Are there white people who grew up around black people, with black people? This is a query. I see your face. But it's a non-trivial question. Are there white folks who talk like black people? And then there's another.
Just opine for a second.
Yeah.
It might be the acceptance of hip hop, because I'm thinking about like white suburban males using the word, right?
Yeah.
And I think it's, you know, the incursion, if you will, of hip hop into the white community as, you know, an acceptable form of music, where we went from, you know, rock and roll to, you know, I guess maybe it was in the late 70s, early 80s when that transition began, and maybe it's hearing it through the music that, you know, again, where there's a permissibility for white suburban males to use the word, unlike, you know, the environment that I grew up where it's
it definitely came in through the music. But even before the music, you had Richard Pryor albums,
Right.
That Nigga's Crazy, Red Fox, Mom's Mabley, right? Paul Mooney. And this was the first time that black people have been using the word nigger since the plantation. That's established. But that was the first time that large white audiences, especially with Richard Pryor and his popularity, that large white audiences heard the term nigger and became privy to the way some African Americans speak in their own communities. But it was with hip hop music. When you heard hip hop music in the 90s blaring out of somebody's car window, and then of course now you have college courses and children's cartoons. Hip hop has become a world global phenomenon, and more non-black people have been exposed to the way some African Americans talk. But I want to say this too about hip hop music. Hip hop music is not always an accurate mirror or reflection of the way black folks talk. There has been a commodification of, you talk about, you know, gangsters, pimps, and hoes, right, of some of that language in service of making dollars. And sometimes it seems like we're saying things more often than we are. And that gets picked up on by folks. But I think you're right. It's certainly, I mean, that's when it's become more.
I'll make one last point because you referenced hip hop. Because when we started listening, again, being from the Bronx,
yeah,
that was, you know, Sugar Hill Gang or Grandmaster Flash. That was a lot of positivity, right? I mean, did that shift over time, you know, in terms of lyrical content of hip hop music? Because the early days were all like, you know, about empowering each other, and that's right, and you know.
Yeah, I agree to an extent, but you also have to appreciate that even figures like Richard Pryor and others, you know, he had a very sanitized routine when he started too, you know, and then later Richard started talking to his audience the way he would talk at home. He could relate to them better, and I feel like his audience related to him better when he took off the three-piece suit and was just Richard. Now, when you talk about hip hop, though, and that evolution, we do see, you know, in the late 80s, you know, the advent of so-called gangster rap, right? And you start seeing more, and who knows if that's because of the record labels, but we start to see the lyrics changed a bit. But we can't really, we don't want to oversimplify this, because the Sugar Hill Gang, the message, that was a message about living in the hood, living in the streets, right? Maybe they didn't use the word nigga or bitches and hoes, but that was a very serious urban message. Yeah. And I think a lot of people drew on those resources, the hip hop generation that came after them in their lyrics. But we also want to be clear about another thing, that all hip hop doesn't contain this language. There's a lot of very positive hip hop music out there with positive messages. They just don't get a lot of the radio play that, you know, some others do. Yeah, you bet. Thank you. Are there any more questions? Thank you. Thank you very much. Thanks, everybody, for coming. I really appreciate you staying out so late. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Professor. That was fantastic.